I have wanted to do this video for ages. Now, if you've watched my channel, you'll know I love printing miniatures and I love the detail that you can achieve from resin printers. It's kind of the bread and butter of my channel. But with resin being simple to configure but messy, and with larger resin models being harder to print on smaller build areas and generally more expensive in material costs, I've always been fascinated with the idea of printing resin quality miniatures on FDM printers, and that's the point of this week's adventure, which actually took me several weeks. So hi, I'm Ross and this is Fohammer Videos. So when I got offered the Bambu Labs X1 Carbon for review, they asked me to do at least 2 videos, and knowing how loved the X1 is, I agreed. I'd have done anything to get hands-on with the X1 series, and no joke, I love that printer and the system so much that I've since bought an A1 Mini, a P1P and a P1S along with £500 worth of filament. So watch out for videos on all of these and more in the coming weeks. But anyway, printing miniatures. Now I want to start off with a big shout out to Danny, also known as the 3D Printing DM. When I first got into this hobby, I loved his channel, and when I started a YouTube channel myself, I hoped that one day I could be big enough to chat with him and maybe even do a collaboration of some sort, because he clearly has the same interests as me. But alas, he seems to have disappeared from YouTube with no update there or on his Twitter account in over a year. So wherever you are in the world, Danny, I hope you're well, because I'm sure I'm not alone here when I say, we miss you, man. But it's his video back in 2018 that showed some impressive detail on minis from FDM printers, and that required a function which kind of tricked Cura to treat every layer like a top layer and iron everything out. So where are we now, 5 years later, and with the best 3D printer on the market? Well, it was Bambu themselves who kind of encouraged me to do this, because they suggested I try their 0.02mm nozzle in one of my videos, because that's one of their lesser considered sizes despite how impressive it is. And the great thing about the Bambu platform and where it works for me is that pretty much everything works out of the box. So this replacement nozzle from the stock 0.4 that comes in the printer comes with a fan attached. You can get them cheaper without the fan attached, but this is what they sent me. When doing it that way, you only need to pop off the magnetized casing for the hot end and undo 2 screws and 3 cables. If you get the nozzle without the fan attached, it's only 2 more screws. So I'd probably suggest getting the cheaper nozzle unless you need to replace the fan. Once you've installed it though, on the printer, make sure you tell it which nozzle size you've installed, and do the same in the Bambu Studio slicer too. And also in this slicer, the highest detail preset available is 0.06mm. If you don't have this visible, it's probably because you still have it set with the 0.4mm nozzle installed. But honestly, that's all there is to set up. Now when it comes to layer height, especially in FDM printing, this is pretty much the most important aspect of miniature printing. I've shown in resin printing years ago that there's a clear difference between the standard 50 micron layers and the now more common 30 or even 20 micron layers. I always aim to match the layer height of prints from my resin printers to the size of the pixels on the screen when I want ultimate detail. So all these new 12K resin printers have 24 micron pixels, so it makes sense to have the layer height set at 20 microns. Though honestly, you should do multiples of the minimum step distance, but that's a whole different conversation. On an FDM printer, however, the best resolution I can get on the horizontal plane is determined by the nozzle size. In this case, it's a circle with a diameter of 0.2mm or 200 microns. The layer height in the preset in the slicer, 0.06mm, is equivalent to 60 microns. On FDM, the layer height will have a different impact too, because of how material extrudes from the nozzle. On a large scale, imagine someone frosting a cake. When expunged from the nozzle of this piping tube, you'll see that the material, in this case icing, is thin where it contacts the cake. Then it gets wider in the body and returns to being thin at the nozzle end. The same is true with tradesmen or DIYers when they've got caulking guns. Just look at the profile of any type of filler from the side and you'll see that it basically sticks out towards you from the middle. And whilst on a printer it's on a really small scale of only 60 microns, the same is true with FDM printers, but I'm going to come back to that. One of the bigger issues when printing the majority of miniatures in FDM is that most are not made with FDM printing in mind. Resin style supports just will not work on FDM miniatures at all, and when using FDM supports like I did on the Dredge Marine I typically print by Mezgeik, they are either excessive or too weak and you lose detail. But still, for an FDM print using generic grey filament from Sunlu and with no calibration other than the printer's built-in LiDAR, where the details are printed here, it's still very impressive for FDM. So to resolve this, I removed supports from the equation. I've been speaking with Duncan Shadow Luca over the past few months, and he's created a series of supportless FDM printable miniatures. And if you don't know Duncan, please check out his work. He initially rocketed to 3D printing miniatures fame for getting a takedown notice from Games Workshop for his Elf Titan model, which to be fair is very clearly a proxy of an Eldar Titan. What? It is. But since his brush with the Imperium, he's gone on to make hundreds of original designs. Well, they're incredible. This guy has skills. His range of supportless models he let me have a play with have come out absolutely fantastic for FDM prints. And I know I for one would love to see him and more creators release more miniatures like this, because there are many people out there intimidated by resin, or those who simply don't want to touch the dangerous chemical stuff or even have it in their home. And that is, well, it's completely understandable. This FDM approach is another solid option for those people, and honestly, even I would much rather use plastic than resin. But when it comes to detail reproduction, even these unfortunately just don't compare. And like I said earlier, I'll come back to it, it's because of the layer lines, and not just the thickness either, but I'll show that better in the next prints. You see, I also recently tried another printer called the Rose Pro, and you can check out that review here. That printer advertised it was capable of 0.02mm layers, or 20 microns, and it turned out that there were a few hoops to jump through to achieve that, and even when you did, based off the sample they sent me, the layer lines were still clearly visible on a relatively large half sphere. But that printer lacked a lot of the modern enhancements you get with the likes of the Bamboo. Now, I tried proxying the Rose Pro's 0.02mm slicer settings into my X1 Carbon, but just like that printer, the profile actually tore up the print, making it worse than 0.06. Most likely because the layers are so thin here that the nozzle will actually be reheating the previous layers, making the material shrink and curl. So to show what this printer can truly do with smooth lines, I got some files sent to me by Wargame Forge, who you can find on my Mini Factory, and I want to do a thanks to Matt from Mini Wargaming, who put me in touch with those guys. So cheers Matt, and thank you to Wargame Forge for sending me these models. Now these buildings are perfect for 6mm to 8mm scale wargames like Warframe or Adeptus Titanicus, and there are countless designs in this set, including pristine and war damaged terrain. And this is where I want to talk about the other challenge with FDM miniatures, and that challenge is time. Just like the models, I printed these 4 buildings at 0.06mm layers on the 0.2mm nozzle, and without supports. This took 6 days to print these buildings in a single colour. Now don't get me wrong, I can be patient for detailed prints. I honestly wouldn't mind waiting longer if it meant the sides would be smooth. And I took these buildings with me to Essen Spiel, where I was doing some dry brush painting demos with Artis Opus, and we did get some good looking results from painting these, but up close you can still see that techniques like dry brushing will enhance the layer lines that are clearly there. But thankfully this looks fine on these buildings, anything with rugged man-made structures like these. But when it comes to more natural looking models or organic structures, I wouldn't employ techniques like dry brushing or washers. Normal brush techniques could hide some of this, but what options do you have at this point? So if you want to print miniatures in FDM, what options do you have? Well honestly, I spend a lot of time showing people what the highest quality resin printers out there using the best and often the most expensive resins available do. But do you know what I see in most miniature gaming halls? People with whole armies printed on a 5-6 year old Photon S with the cheapest resin they can find. And you know what? They're happy with that. Because despite my love and many people's meditation style of love for the process of painting models, the majority of wargamers still find painting a chore or even a barrier to getting a game running on the tabletop. And if you're a wargamer yourself, how many people have you played that have unpainted models? Christ, how many are still using standees? So when you consider that, 3D printing miniatures to this standard in FDM is more than fine. In fact, it's far less messy than resin printing. And when you consider that printers like the Bamboo series with their AMS units can print with multiple colours, you can always just print out your minis ready painted. But if you are going to do that, just consider for a second that this single building, still at 0.06mm layers, had an 8.5 day print time. But actually it took 14 because, as I said, I was at Essen Spiel whilst it was printing, and I was on the phone asking my wife back home to clear out filament jams as it was getting due to inefficient colour change extrusion lengths. Now, I've since sorted that by just clicking the flushing volumes option in the slicer and then halving it. And for this video, I also wanted to print the aforementioned full colour miniature as an example, and I spent a good 2 hours painting it in the slicer. However, when I realised that this would be a 10-day print with over 1 kilogram of flushed filament for what is only a 200-gram print, I decided against it. As cool as it would be, I'm far too cheap to spend $35 in wasted filament for what is a small single model. Though to be honest, I could save a lot of money by just filling the plate with this model, and then the cost per model comes down significantly. But honestly, why do I need 30 of them? So instead, and because I made a promise in my bolt gun video that I'd print a Titan if that video got 20,000 likes, please bear in mind I said that as a joke as I thought it would never happen, but as a test I printed this toe in 2 halves and it took me 3 days. So please stop putting likes on my bolt gun video. In the last 5 years, it's great to see that we've now got companies like Bamboo who can give us prints with details like this already, because these models are pretty good for an out-of-box slicer setting. And I'm confident, based on Danny's video alone back from 2018, that far better quality is possible with more refinement of the slicer settings. It's all about smoothing out those sides, and I really hope someone out there nails it and shares a profile. And if you have one, please let me know down in the comments. But personally, what I think would be perfect is if Bamboo could figure it out and give us that profile in the slicer. Even if prints do take forever, if we can get an official out-of-the-box ultimate detail profile, they'd have a brand that could potentially disrupt the entire resin market. I want to say thanks for watching, and a huge thanks goes out to our members. Please consider joining them and getting your name up in lights, along with exclusive videos and direct access to me and priority comments. If you did like this video at all or found it helpful or interesting or have anything to add, please drop a comment below, please hit the like button and please hit subscribe. Until next time, thanks for watching, thanks again, I'll see you all soon, Fohammer out.